So, good morning. Thanks for stopping by to check out our latest episode of the podcast. As always, I'm going to ask you to go to patmcclanahan.com and go to the various social media websites. Their icons are in the upper right-hand corner. And if you would go and like and subscribe and follow me, that would pump our numbers up. Also on the website, if you scroll to the bottom, there's an opportunity to subscribe to a newsletter. And that way I can just simply send out an email real quick whenever I post a new episode. So that would just really help me. So far, only have a few names, but just please add yourself to that, and that would be good. So this morning we're going to talk about Loudoun County Public Schools. And some of you may say, that sounds vaguely familiar. Loudoun County is in not Pennsylvania, in Virginia. And a couple of years ago, they had an incident in one of their high schools where a female student was sexually assaulted by a male student. And there were several questions that were raised at that time. People were pointing out, well, this is what happens when you allow males into the female restrooms and locker rooms and that sort of thing. In particular, in light of the transgender issues that are abounding. But in reality, this was not a trans issue. This was a young man and a young woman that had been having consensual sex, and they had agreed to meet up in the stall in the women's restroom. And when they did, the female student said, "No, I really don't want to do this." And the male student sexually assaulted her, raped her in the restroom. And there was a lot at that time in the media about how this is not a good thing. But it wasn't until actually about a month later before Loudoun County Public Schools actually passed a restroom policy that allowed members of the opposite sex to use the restroom of their gender identity. And so it wasn't even an issue, shouldn't have been an issue, but this young man was in the women's restroom anyway, or girls' restroom. So the incident we're talking about occurred in March of this year, of 2025, and a female student who identifies as a boy was in the boys' locker room and took a video. And from that video, then charges were filed against 3 boys that were in the locker room at the time. Title IX sexual harassment charges were filed, and that investigation is still ongoing. We're going to take a look at the video here so understand what I'm talking about. Here we go. And so that's the video that has caused this whole stir. So we are also going to take a look in a minute at a interview I did with Josh Hetzler from the Founding Freedoms Law Center, who is representing these boys. A couple things have happened. One of the young men, the charges against him have been dismissed. The other 2 have had additional charges of sex-based discrimination filed against them, in addition to the sexual harassment charges that were originally filed. Now there is also some concern amongst some. The young man who had the charges dismissed is a Muslim. The other 2 are Christian. Now, there's no mention of Muslim or Christian in any of the charges or the dismissal letters or anything. But there is this concern. According to the dismissal letter, it states that even if they were able even if the charges could be proven true, they wouldn't hold up under Title IX. I don't know why that applies to one of the boys when all three of them were charged with the same thing under, according to this video. And so we'll take a look at the interview. Due to some technical difficulties, I lost about the first 90 seconds or so of the interview, in which Josh was just kind of giving an overview of Title IX. Now, Title IX is Title IX of the Civil Rights Act, and its original intent was to force academic institutions to provide interscholastic athletic competitions for girls as well as for boys, that they couldn't discriminate by offering 15 sports for boys and none or one or two for the girls, that there had to be some sense of evenness. And over time that has been taken to broader and broader context outside of simply athletics. And even just more recently, President Biden included gender identity into the Title IX, and so just added to it. Now, when President Trump came into office, he undid some of that President Biden had included, and so it's been kind of reverted back to where it was prior to President Biden, including the gender identity stuff. So we're going to take a look at the interview right now, and then we'll come back and talk some more. So then how do they the school district, they use Title IX to in some fashion to say that these boys that were on this video sexually harassed the trans boy that was in the locker room, and that now the two that still have charges against them also have this sex-based discrimination. What can you define the sexual harassment and the sexual-based discrimination?
Yeah, well, the Loudoun County's policy defines it this way. Sexual harassment says unwelcome conduct is determined by a reasonable person to be so severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive that it effectively denies a person equal access to the LCPS's education program or activity. So I think what they would be claiming is the comments by the boys in the locker room asking why there's a girl in here were so terrible that it effectively would have, prevents her from being able to use the facility in the way that she apparently should, right? And of course, we think that's, even under that standard, that's crazy. That's not what happened. No objective, reasonable person would think that they denied her use of that locker room. Now,
right,
address the fact that she never should be in that locker room to begin with, which is an underlying issue. But even if she is, as a girl, allowed to use the boys' locker room, they certainly didn't do this. And they certainly, even if it was harassment, which it wasn't, there was nothing sexual about it. And we think that the understanding of sexual harassment ought to have to be something of a sexual nature. And no one claims that it was. So we just think this is totally not applicable. And then, sex-based discrimination is one that they added recently against our two Christian clients while dropping the investigation altogether for our Muslim client.
Yeah.
And sex-based discrimination actually isn't really defined, which is one of the problems. It just says, here's what it says under the term sex-based discrimination. Title IX covers reports of alleged sex-based discrimination in student programs or activities, including, and it lists a couple of things. Well, you're defining a term by the term itself. It doesn't actually tell us what sex-based discrimination is. So does that mean, if somebody wants, let's say there's a dance at school and a boy is only choosing girls to ask to dance. He's not asking boys to dance with them. Is that sex-based discrimination? Well, it could be under their broad definition.
Yeah.
We don't know what it means. And that's a big problem with it. It lacks the due process um, that should be afforded to anyone for having notice to know what the standard is so that they wouldn't violate it. But this doesn't even give us a definition.
I saw you describing in a previous podcast. I believe it was the Family Foundation's podcast that you were on a while back. The kinds of impacts that these types of charges can have on young men as they go forward in life. Can you maybe expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, well, these Title IX investigations can certainly have a hugely stigmatizing effect on young men and women, especially young men. I mean, I think about, the Duke lacrosse situation years ago when I think it was a Title IX accusation of sexual harassment or rape, and it turned out to be totally false, right?
Right.
It did
Yes.
significant damage to those boys, and that follows them, even when it's unfounded. So the fact that they're going through this process, the fact that it's gotten so much news that, it could stick with them. Um, the actual punishment is bad enough, which could range anywhere from suspension to detention to suspension to expulsion. But the real negative impact is the stigmatizing effect they'll follow them through college as they try to get into colleges, and they'll have to make known their disciplinary record, or if they want to go into the military or job prospect. So, it just has a potentially profound effect on their livelihoods going forward.
Okay. So uh, the charges have been filed and dropped against the one Muslim student. And so what's the process now? I mean, from this point, charges have been filed. You're representing the two boys. I mean, does it go through a court hearing kind of a thing, or is this all outside of the actual judicial system, or what's the process?
Right now, it's all internal to the school. So they have certain due process standards that they have to follow. But it's up to the school. Now, if they come back and they find our clients guilty, we have a chance to appeal internally. And if they still do the wrong thing, I think there may be options to sue. But this is the scary thing about all this, is that it doesn't have the light of day that the court process would give it. And so that the school system has an outsized influence here, and there's very little that can be done about it internally. They sort of hold all the cards.
Wow. Wow. So it's not a typical legal process that you're innocent until proven guilty type of thing. They kind of get their chance to say what they want, and whether, because there's no jury, it's just their internal process then.
Yeah, so varying there's varying degrees of proof that you have to show to establish guilt. There's the beyond a reasonable doubt standard, which is for criminal offenses. The lower standard, which is preponderance of the evidence, which just has to be 50% plus one, just over 50%. If it's more likely than not that
Right.
the
Yeah.
alleged offense occurred, then you're guilty. So, in other words, it's not a whole lot more than he said, she said, and that they can be found guilty because their standard is preponderance of the evidence.
Okay. Okay. Wow. So is there any kind of timeline on this, or does it just drag on until it reaches a conclusion?
So the school did an initial investigative report, and they interviewed about 20 student witnesses, 5 faculty witnesses, and they did a whole lot of things. And so we got a report recently that was 555 pages, and we had
Wow.
10 days to go through that and give our response. We gave our response. Then they got back to us quickly with the final report, and there's a second 10-day response opportunity, which we're in the middle of. Soon, in a week or so, they're going to send it off to sort of this allegedly neutral, independent third party decision maker who's going to decide whether our boys are guilty. And then I suppose, depending on what they do, we'll have some limited right to appeal. But at the K through 12 level, you don't actually have a right to any type of in-person trial to where you can cross-examine anyone. There's a little bit more at the collegiate level, but here at the high school level, there's not a whole lot we can do. And in terms of the appeal, we can only appeal on very limited bases. For example, showing that the decision makers had some obvious bias. Well, they might have bias, but proving that is a different matter. And
Right.
they may be ideologically aligned with the transgender movement. That doesn't necessarily make them biased against our client. So there's little opportunity to appeal a bad decision. That's why it's so important that they get this right.
Yeah, for sure. Wow, that's really interesting. I just really appreciate filling in so many gaps, because I had a lot of gaps, not ever having been exposed to Title IX that much. Anyway, so one other question: in several of the written news articles, it said that the girl had been using the boys' locker room for a while. I mean, that's the way it reads, is like, oh, and so I was curious, is that correct? Or why if she had been in the locker room in previous times, why all of a sudden did the boys say something, or is that a don't know kind
Yeah,
of
that's a
what
very good
happened?
question. So the girl had been using the boys' locker room throughout the entire school year. Now, the first 2 months of school, I believe they had driver's ed, so they weren't using the locker room. And then somewhere in October, she began using the boys' locker room. And the boys at that time, including at least one of our clients, expressed discomfort, concern, and was asking questions. At that time, they were pulled aside and said, "You're not allowed to talk about this. You can't ask
Oh,
those questions." And so it kind of made the boys quiet down. Now they should be allowed to talk about those things, but that was what they were told. Well, something changed in January, and that was the election of Donald Trump. And a number of executive orders were signed that impacted this issue directly, and basically directed all schools receiving Title IX funds not to do this, not to allow students of the opposite sex into opposite sex locker rooms and bathrooms. And Loudoun
right.
County was openly defying this. So the boys began to ask the questions again, because they were seriously confused. And were saying, isn't it the law that you can't do this? Of course, there's the Virginia law too that Loudoun County is in violation of. And so the boys, but especially because of the Trump executive orders, they began to ask the questions again. And that's how this came up.
Got it. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Kind of very interesting. Uh, Hopefully, justice will be served, and these young men won't be impacted as they go on in the future with the stigma over their lives. But
Yeah, there's
so
big implications for the boys, of course. There's even bigger implications for the meaning of Title IX and how if this can happen to them, it can happen to anyone, anywhere, because almost every school accepts Title IX funding, right? And if Loudoun County can do it, then it means
Right.
any student who expresses discomfort of an opposite sex student changing in their midst in their locker room, is suddenly subject to sexual harassment charges. It really flips everything on its head. And that's why we have to win this. We cannot allow Loudoun to go through with these charges.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, again, I appreciate your time, and thank you very much for that.
Thanks.
So yeah, there's the interview, and a lot of information that Josh shared about the process and where it's at and the implications and a lot of those kinds of things. So just an interesting situation. Obviously, our prayers are with everybody that's involved in this. That it's just a hard thing. We pray that the boys won't be shackled with this thing for the rest of their lives. We also pray for the female student that there would be some type of resolution for her as well. So anyway, thanks for stopping by. I'll update people once a final solution has been determined, and we'll go from there. So have a great day, and we will catch you later. Bye-bye.